So there's breaking news in the It Ends With Us drama between Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds on one hand, and Justin Baldoni and his production company, Wayfarer Studios LLC, on the other hand. It Ends With Us director and actor Justin Baldoni has lodged a $400 million defamation and extortion suit against his co-star, Blake Lively, and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, claiming that Blake Lively fabricated sexual harassment claims against Baldoni to distract from her self-inflicted press catastrophe. His story is that she brought this all on herself and she fabricated these alleged lies about him to take away from that negative perception of herself. So in this 179-page complaint, Justin Baldoni disputed Lively's claims against him, instead claiming that she used her immense power to seize control of the film It Ends With Us and then destroy the reputation of Justin Baldoni and his production company, Wayfarer Studios LLC, when they did not bend to her incessant demands. So notably, Baldoni says that Lively leaked her California Civil Rights Department complaint, a filing that typically remains private, to the New York Times, using the news organization as a conduit for her revenge. Lively delivered that complaint to him and his team over the Christmas holiday and then leaked it to the newspaper rather than promptly filing a lawsuit. Baldoni asserts in his suit filed in New York federal court. So that's because she never intended to file a suit, is his claim, which would have triggered Baldoni's right to obtain evidence and depositions and discovery. So he claims that this was intentional. I don't know about that, because I think that when you're filing a civil rights department complaint, which is with an administrative agency, you have to wait for a certain period of time before you can actually go ahead and file a lawsuit. You have to, that's how it is in many states. You have to exhaust your administrative remedies first. But let's get into the crux of this complaint here. Justin Baldoni alleges in this complaint that let's go to page 2. They're laying out all the parties here, which is Justin Baldoni and his studio. They are suing in federal court. The following is not a story plaintiffs ever wished to tell. That's very dramatic. That's a very dramatic opening. Justin Baldoni then goes on to allege in his complaint that the defendant, Blake Lively, has unequivocally left them with no choice, not only to set the record straight in response to Lively's accusations, but also to put the spotlight on the parts of Hollywood that they have dedicated their careers to being the antithesis of. That task was always going to be an uphill battle. They never imagined that they would encounter it to this degree. Had Lively chosen to merely ride out the self-inflicted press catastrophe that she faced in August of 2024, the public would likely have moved on and never known the truth about her. They would have never known that she deliberately and systematically robbed plaintiffs Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer Studios LLC of their movie. No one except the parties involved would have known that she used threats and extortion to relegate the colleagues that she once highly praised to a basement to sit out their own premiere, while she enjoyed the spotlight of a premiere and after party that was ultimately co-financed by both Wayfarer and Sony. She would have gotten away with these things and more, and more, because Baldoni, focused entirely on seeing the film succeed, would have held his tongue, as he had through the year and a half that Lively tormented him, his family, and his partners. So this is hearkening back to facts that Baldoni set forth in his complaint against the New York Times, where he says that she took control of the movie. He produced text messages between him and editors where she had actually taken over editing and approval of final cuts of the movie. He alleges that she relegated him and his family to a basement to have to watch the premiere because she didn't want him around to be near her. So then his complaint now, which is directly against Lively, states, but Lively could not tolerate her publicly tainted image for even a moment, and further, could not accept that it was entirely of her own making. She needed a scapegoat, And rather than admit and take accountability for her own mishaps, she chose to blame plaintiffs Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer Studios in a malicious and unforgivably public manner. When she and Reynolds could not force Baldoni and Wayfarer to read a statement she and her representatives prepared, extorting them to take accountability in defense of Lively's actions, she lay in wait for months, preparing to publicly attack Baldoni by falsely claiming that he had sexually harassed her. The same falsified stories that she had calculatingly devised and used throughout the production of this film in order to take control were now being used publicly to destroy Baldoni and the other plaintiffs. So then Justin Baldoni goes on to allege Lively stole Wayfarer's movie, hijacked Wayfarer's premiere, destroyed the plaintiff's personal and professional reputations and livelihood, and aimed to drive plaintiffs out of business entirely. It further appears that Lively worked for months with the equally powerful New York Times to prepare a false and damaging narrative to deploy against plaintiffs. Not surprisingly, Lively prepared an administrative complaint with the Civil Rights Department in California, the CRD complaint, in an attempt to use the litigation privilege to shield her behind-the-scenes conspiracy with the New York Times. But upon information and belief, the California Civil Rights Department complaint was filed only after defendants spent months feeding falsehoods to the New York Times, intending that they be disseminated to damage plaintiffs. Lively delivered the California Civil Rights Department complaint to plaintiffs over the Christmas holiday, and rather than promptly file a lawsuit, Lively, on information and belief, leaked the typically private CRD complaint to the public, utilizing the New York Times as conduit for her revenge. The Civil Rights Department complaint, and upon information and belief, the false information delivered to the New York Times before the CRD complaint was filed, was rife with lies and doctored evidence. Lively then waited 11 days to file suit against plaintiffs in what seemed to be a desperate move after the public questioned why she had never filed a civil lawsuit. On information and belief, Lively never intended to file a civil lawsuit, which would have triggered plaintiffs' right to discovery, including obtaining evidence and deposing Lively under oath. By the time Lively actually filed a lawsuit against plaintiffs, the damage to plaintiffs was done by virtue of Lively's months of colluding with the New York Times on a false and malicious narrative unshielded by any privilege. Make no mistake, these actions were deliberate. So his narrative is that, his theory is that Blake intentionally used a civil rights complaint instead of filing a lawsuit, because when you file a lawsuit, the other party has a right to depose you. They have a right to get discovery. They have a lot of rights in that adversarial process. And they're claiming that she used a different process, which is it was the administrative agency, California Civil Rights Department, to instead file a complaint and then leaked the complaint so that Justin Baldoni's reputation would be harmed in the interim by the time she filed a public lawsuit. Then he goes on to allege plaintiffs now have no choice but to fight back, armed only with the truth and the mountain of concrete evidence disproving Lively's allegations. Heartbreakingly, a film that Baldoni envisioned years ago would honor the survivors of domestic violence by telling their story with the lofty goal of making a positive impact in the world has now been overshadowed beyond recognition solely as a result of Lively's actions and cruelty. I will also say that I think a lot of people have watched this film who wouldn't normally have watched this film, including myself. You know, I wouldn't have necessarily watched this film, but I did go on Netflix and watch it after all these lawsuits came out. So I think it's questionable whether this has harmed the film itself or whether it actually has brought more popularity to the film. But let's move on. So Justin Baldoni is saying, Lively wields immense power as one of the world's best-known celebrities. In 2024, she used that power to seize control of the film It Ends With Us, produced and co-financed by plaintiff Wayfarer and directed by Baldoni, who also portrayed the lead named Ryle. She set out to destroy plaintiffs' livelihoods and businesses if they did not bend to her incessant demands, and when they refused to give way, she did exactly that. accusing them of foul and reprehensible sexual misconduct. Wayfarer was blindsided when Lively, upon the conclusion of the industry strikes, refused to return to production absent the company's agreeing to her non-negotiable protections for return to productions. The return to production demands that insinuated misconduct had occurred during filming, which, as evidence will establish, did not. Wayfarer was equally blindsided when Lively leveraged this document, essentially signed under duress, to seize control of the film, ultimately getting her own cut of the film and a coveted PGA mark. And at her command, ousting Baldoni from all marketing and promotional efforts with many of the cast members and the author, all of whom he until then had long-standing positive relationships with. And that is interesting that because there was buzz and speculation as to why Justin Baldoni was not doing press with the other cast members, because when you look at all these things on Instagram and all the press that was occurring, all these interviews, it was Blake Lively and like the other women, or Blake Lively and Brandon, who is the lead that played her love interest in the film, not Ryle, not Ryle Kincaid, that was played by Justin Baldoni, but there was an actor named Brandon who was playing her main love interest. So Baldoni was really not prevalent on like the press tour, except in interviews where he seemed to be alone. So it's interesting that his narrative is that was because of her, and like she demanded that he be separated, that he was being ostracized. He was not able to therefore promote his own movie that was produced by his own production company. So moving forward in this complaint, Justin Baldoni goes on to state that Lively's exclusion of Baldoni from the promotion of the film backfired, as she chose to callously promote her hair care and alcoholic beverage products rather than bring attention to survivors of domestic violence, the entire premise of the film. Baldoni, who it was now prohibited from attending events or taking photos with Lively and the cast, promoted the film as he had always intended ever since he first began the process of making the film years ago. When Lively faced significant public backlash from what was often referred to as her tone-deaf and insensitive press tour for the film, she doubled down on her false and misleading accusations against Baldoni. She seemed determined to make Baldoni the real-life villain in her story. Her publicist, Leslie Sloan, who's also one of the defendants in his lawsuit, went so far as to propagate malicious stories portraying Baldoni as a sexual predator, a term Lively's husband, Ryan Reynolds, also used to describe Baldoni when he called Baldoni's own agent. Modern society justly reviles sexual harassers and abusers, and Lively knew full well that making those allegations would be a career death sentence for plaintiffs, especially given that Baldoni has lived his private and public life as an impassioned advocate for gender equality and healthy masculinity. She did not expect, however, that plaintiffs would be able to meet those allegations with concrete documentary evidence disproving her claims and demonstrating that they, not Lively, were the targets of a calculated and vitriolic smear campaign. Wow, they're pulling out their thesauruses for this. That evidence, included in part herein, is the basis for plaintiffs' claims against defendants for their extortion, defamation, and further wrongdoing. So there was a lot of criticism for Blake. She was not only promoting her hair care line and alcoholic beverages line, but there is studies that suggest that 55% of domestic violence incidents involve alcohol. So that was particularly troubling to many people, that she was promoting alcoholic beverages line while starring in this movie that is supposed to shed light on survivors of domestic violence. So she did take a lot of heat for that, and Justin's really going in on her here. So the next thing he states in the complaint is that when Lively faced significant, the film was the hotly anticipated adaptation of a worldwide best-selling book by Colleen Hoover. And by starring in it as Lily, Lively stood to enhance her already considerable star power. But she was not content merely to headline one of the year's biggest movies. Instead, apparently driven by overweening ambition and a need for control, Lively eventually leveraged her power as a wealthy celebrity to wrest the reins from her co-star and the film's director, Baldoni, insisting on total control over every aspect of the film she could get her hands on, from wardrobe to marketing strategy to music. So they're saying, wow, she really took over every aspect of the film, including even creating her own cut of the film. Not only did Lively's power ploy cost numerous people their jobs, but at every turn, her wrong-headed creative decisions reflected her fundamental lack of understanding of the book the film was based on. This came as no surprise to her worried colleagues, given that even well into production, Lively had not even read the book. Oh, they're really going in. They're saying that she later claimed she read the book, but text evidence shows that well into production she had not, and in fact expressed she had chosen not to read the book. She even tried to Google the color of her character's hair rather than pick up the book. So September 14, 2023, text message from Baldoni to Heath. Janie Heath is one of the individuals that works with Baldoni on the movie. So we are nothing to see her full. After rereading the book, which had 150 pages to build their relationship, we have combined scenes to heighten the stakes for Ryle in pursuit of Lily, utilizing humor and his desire to sleep with her. While I understand Blake's reasons for not wanting to read the book does a very good job in getting in Lily's mind during her interactions with Ryle and setting up the why behind her attraction to him, which ultimately helps us understand why she stays in the end. Well, I don't think that's proof that she didn't read the book, because this is just text messages where Baldoni is characterizing that and saying, well, she didn't read the book. That doesn't prove that she didn't read the book. This is not a text message from Blake Lively. Lively's disastrous marketing efforts and tone-deaf press interviews and appearances backfired and led to widespread criticism of Lively's promotional approach to the film's highly sensitive focus on domestic violence. Past videos of Lively resurfaced online, videos that appeared to solidify public perception that Lively was an insensitive mean girl who cared more about peddling her products and acknowledging the domestic violence survivor community. Social media commenters quickly pointed out that her tie-in of her alcoholic beverages was in particularly poor taste, given the World Health Organization estimates that 55% of domestic violence incidents are linked to alcohol. Unbelievably, Lively made this harmful and irresponsible message worse by naming a drink at her premiere after-party, Ryle, You Wait, after the character who committed domestic violence in the film. The suggestion that Wayfarer caused the online backlash against her is absurd, given the evidence of her own insensitivity. And she was criticized for saying that this is a movie where you should wear your florals and go grab your girlfriends to go see. She was kind of depicting it as a rom-com, and many feel that she was not really fully appreciating the nature of the domestic violence that was depicted in the movie. Sadly, this backlash could have been avoided had she not refused to meet with the film's domestic violence partner organization, nomore.org, as Baldoni had offered. Even a brief visit to their website or a simple online search would have readily uncovered this and other information on the topic of domestic violence. Meanwhile, Baldoni, whom Lively herself had ensured was excluded from participating in her marketing efforts, was safeguarded from this backlash as he focused on amplifying the voices of those affected by domestic violence, as originally intended when he reached out to author Colleen Hoover 5 years ago, and documented by his partnership with nomore.org dating back to 2022. Baldoni's sincere efforts were well received, even more so in contrast with Lively's campaign to downplay the premise of the film and sell hair care and alcohol products. Lively, enraged that her plans were foiled and armed with proof of alleged sexual harassment in the form of a 17-point list of demands she had required plaintiffs to sign just months earlier, focused her rage on Baldoni, blaming him for the consequences of her own missteps. Meanwhile, Stephanie Jones, founder of JonesWorks LLC, Wayfarer's and Baldoni's erstwhile PR firm, was embroiled in a personal and professional crisis. Her increasingly erratic behavior had driven away not only high-profile clients, but also her right-hand woman, plaintiff Jennifer Abel, who oversaw the JonesWorks Los Angeles office. Jones' behavior grew more and more bizarre as she lashed out at loyal clients like Wayfarer in rage-filled rants and veered away from professional experience and strategy when making critical decisions affecting JonesWorks clients. After a final outburst against Wayfarer in which she outright refused to comply with her direct instructions, Wayfarer had no choice but to cut ties with Jones and JonesWorks rather than leave their public image in the hands of what appeared to be an out-of-control Jones, whose actions were not aligned with Wayfarer and Baldoni's worldview and wishes. So this is the PR firm that the relationship went sour between Justin Baldoni and his prior PR firm. A lot of these messages were produced by that firm, and I think there's going to be some issues with that. Jones was filled with impotent rage at Wayfarer and at Abel, who a month before had announced her decision to leave JonesWorks to form her own company. Jones saw the opportunity for revenge. She took it. On information and belief, Jones, Lively, Reynolds, and Leslie Stone, which is Lively's publicist, and others concocted a plan whereby Jones would seize Abel's phone upon her departure and mine it for messages that, stripped of context, could be used to concoct a false narrative that the disastrous press coverage of Lively's callous and opportunistic comments and the public reaction to those comments were not Lively's fault at all, but the result of a calculated, though in reality non-existent, smear campaign by Baldoni and his team. On information and belief, Jones's role in this scheme accounts for her conspicuous absence from Lively's retelling of events. Plaintiffs are informed and believe that defendants have been working in concert since at least August 21st, 2024, when Sloan boasted to Nathan that she had seen her texts and that Nathan would soon be sued. So basically, they're claiming that Lively and Ryan Reynolds conspired with the prior PR person of Justin Baldoni and mined her phone for messages, and they didn't release these messages in full context, but they kind of cherry picked to make messages appear as though they had been involved, as though Justin had been involved with a smear campaign against Lively. And in an earlier live stream on my channel, I went through not only Justin Baldoni's complaint filed against the New York Times, where he's suing for $250 million, but also Blake Lively's complaint, the California Civil Rights Department complaint that she filed against Baldoni. So that provides further context into this. So Baldoni then goes on to allege in this complaint that though Lively claimed Baldoni was the one smearing her, the reality is that it was Lively and her team who carefully planned and implemented a foul smear campaign against Baldoni and Wayfarer to deflect attention and blame for Lively's disastrous misjudgments. Lively would recast herself as the long-suffering martyr by portraying Baldoni and Wayfarer as her persecutors, the masterminds behind a smear campaign that evidence will show did not exist. Defendant Sloan of Vision PR was all too willing to carry out the strategy, especially once armed with ammunition by Jones, who was bent on revenge against her ex-employee and former client. So moving along, next, he goes on to assert in his complaint, Shortly after the film's premiere and the public backlash against Lively, together with her husband, defendant Ryan Reynolds, demanded through their talent agency, which also represented Wayfarer and Baldoni, that plaintiffs publicly apologize for so-called mistakes during production in order to deflect the avalanche of negative media coverage of Lively. Reynolds and Lively drafted a statement and demanded that Baldoni, Wayfarer, and Heath issue that statement, requiring them to apologize to the public and fall on their sword despite having done nothing wrong, or else the gloves would come off. Multiple WME executives acknowledged that, in their experience, Lively and Reynolds' threats were not to be taken lightly. Though admitting to false, vague, and unspecified mistakes would be tantamount to admitting to career-ending misconduct, Baldoni, Wayfarer, and Heath refused to apologize for sins they had never committed. They took a stand, knowing full well that Lively and Reynolds would bring the full might of their celebrity artillery against them. And that is precisely what happened. Lively, working with her husband, her publicist, and Jones, among others, set out on a campaign to tar and feather plaintiffs in the press. They conspired and worked in concert with the New York Times to put out a blockbuster news report as devastating as it was false. They advanced a fabricated narrative in the press that plaintiffs had sexually harassed Lively, then embarked on a calculated and malicious smear campaign to destroy her reputation as retaliation for daring to complain about the harassment. Defendants laid their trap carefully over a period of months before springing it all at once on the eve of the winter holidays. Just as plainly, they knew full well that their claims were entirely baseless because their own wrongfully obtained evidence proved that neither the alleged sexual harassment nor the accompanying smear campaign against Lively ever existed. Yet Lively moved forward with her plan with ruthless precision, doubling down in the face of abundant evidence, casting doubt on the veracity of her story. Well, I will say Brian Friedman and his attorneys can really write. They do a great job writing narrative. I mean, I'm very enthralled in this complaint. What do you think, friends? Let me know in the comments. All right, so next, Justin then states Lively even went so far as to serve her lawsuit on the Los Angeles-based defendants as they evacuated their homes in the midst of devastating fires engulfing their city. On a day when defendants were gathering their kids and pets, preparing go bags, and monitoring evacuation orders while fearing for their homes, Lively, from the safety of her penthouse in New York, deployed process servers in the midst of these troubling times. Oh, wow. They're really kind of tugging at the heartstrings. They're claiming that she was in New York in her penthouse, living the life, while they were facing evacuation for the fires that have ravaged Los Angeles. She served them with the complaint. At bottom, this is not a case about celebrities sniping at each other in the press. This is a case about two of the most powerful stars in the world, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, deploying their enormous power to steal an entire film right out of the hands of its director and production studio. Then, when Lively and Reynolds' efforts failed to win them the acclaim that they believed they so richly deserved, they turned their fury on their chosen scapegoat. Tolerating a year and a half of their behavior while remaining polite and professional at every turn, offered Baldoni and Wayfarer no protection. By bringing this complaint, plaintiffs commit themselves to seeking and proving the facts based not on insinuations built from selectively edited and context-free text snippets, but by putting all the evidence before the court and the public. When plaintiffs have their day in court, the jury will recognize that even the most powerful celebrity cannot bend the truth to her will. They're sending a message that they are not looking to settle this case. They're looking to take it to the jury. They're looking to get discovery. They're looking to depose Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds. They're looking to go for the long haul. That's what they're at least putting out there in this complaint. And Ryan Reynolds did actually issue a message where he was seeming to be trying to quell the fire between the parties before he got sued with Blake Lively. But it's a little bit too late. Baldoni and Wayfarer purchased the rights to It Ends With Us. Baldoni co-founded Wayfarer in 2019. From the beginning, Wayfarer was dedicated to being a different kind of studio. one that produced world-class entertainment driven by a powerful vision for change. Baldoni, whose film career was dedicated to producing and directing meaningful films to have a positive impact on the world, was deeply moved when he read the book It Ends With Us and genuinely believed he could make a film that could save lives. His last two films were created as a result of a deep sense of responsibility to share meaningful stories. Baldoni's feature film directorial debut, 5 Feet Apart, was based on a young woman, Claire Wineland, who lived with cystic fibrosis and courageously documented her plight on YouTube. Baldoni, his family, and friends developed a friendship with Claire, whose journey deeply inspired Baldoni. Before Claire passed away, Baldoni promised he would tell her story, and he did just that in the film he directed. The film had wide impact on the cystic fibrosis community, and Baldoni still receives messages about the film's impact. Baldoni also supports her foundation yearly and remained close with Claire's parents, even bringing her father as his guest to the premiere of It Ends With Us. Baldoni's more recent film was the Wayfarer film Clouds, a true story about a teenager with cancer, Zach Sobak, who finds joyful purpose and inspiration in music. In pursuit of that same vision, in 2019, Wayfarer acquired the film rights to It Ends With Us, a Colleen Hoover novel published in 2016. Though positioned as a romance novel, the book explores themes of domestic violence and generational patterns of abuse, and these messages resonated deeply with readers and drew a passionate fan base. In 2021, the novel exploded in popularity thanks to the social media phenomenon Book Talk. Many fans expressed how important the book was to them as survivors of domestic violence and intimate partner abuse. When It Ends With Us author Colleen Hoover watched 5 Feet Apart in theaters, she told Baldoni, "You are the right person to make this movie," referring to It Ends With Us. Baldoni's early emails to Hoover demonstrate his commitment to doing so in the manner he envisioned would be most impactful. In fact, it was Hoover who suggested Baldoni portray Ryle. Ryle was the main character in It Ends With Us. And this is their communication between one another that Justin Baldoni has put into the complaint. These are email threads between them. He claims that he had a really positive relationship with Colleen Hoover, who's the author of the film, prior to everything going south with Blake Lively and her taking over the film, allegedly. So next, soon after, Wayfarer partnered with Sony to co-finance and distribute the film. Their agreement included, at Wayfarer and Baldoni's insistence, that the provision was a deal breaker, a requirement that 1% of the film proceeds be donated in support of survivors of domestic abuse. That 1% was ultimately earmarked for the organization No More, with which Baldoni had sought to partner with as early as September of 2022. As they began making the film, Baldoni and Wayfarer felt an immense responsibility to do justice not only to the story of protagonist Lily Bloom, but to the stories of survivors around the world. Plaintiff Heath, CEO of Wayfarer, expressed to Forbes on June 28, 2024, his high hopes for the film. "I hope the people leave the theater feeling inspired, that for those who have been hurt, that they feel seen, and the story was told in a way that honored them. I feel like people who may in themselves, as someone that they may hurt somebody, may think twice about it. So I hope that people leave feeling that they got a glimpse into a world that oftentimes we turn our eyes away from." In casting Blake Lively, a world-renowned actor with talent and charisma, vision to bring Lily to life. Although Wayfarer learned that Lily had a reputation for being difficult to work with, Baldoni at the time was not dissuaded and found her to be genuine. In fact, some of the things indicate, even some of the things that Lively has produced indicate that they did have a good working relationship at the beginning. So Justin Baldoni's complaint goes on to state, during pre-production, Baldoni and Lively begin a promising and close collaboration. On or about December 31, 2022, Lively agreed to take the lead role of Lily Bloom. As part of the subsequent negotiations, Lively was granted an executive producer credit, a title often given to talent of her stature. Lively had requested a producer credit, but Wayfarer and Sony demurred, given that such a title would not accurately reflect the role she was asked to play in the production. Wayfarer did not request nor require that Lively contribute to the film in any capacity beyond her roles as actor and executive producer. In the beginning, it appeared that Baldoni and Lively would have a positive collaborative creative partnership. Baldoni and Lively worked closely in the early days of the film, trading ideas about filling key roles in the film's cast and crew. Their working relationship grew close. Baldoni and Lively shared stories and pictures from their lives, commiserated over family illnesses, and exchanged jokes and memes. Baldoni offered concern and support when Lively faced family health concerns. They texted almost daily, and a friendly banter established a comfortable dynamic that, under typical circumstances, would have made working together easy. So then these are some examples of text messages that Justin Baldoni has produced that he says support what he's saying in the complaint. Lively even felt comfortable enough to make silly jokes, redirecting a sweet compliment Baldoni gave her. So here's some text messages. Some of it's redacted for privacy. She says, I feel I feel the same. It's such a good feeling to get work done that we're proud of and to do it together. It just clicks when we find it. And that's just as rewarding as filming it or editing it or marketing it or releasing it. This is all storytelling. This is why we do it. Thank you for your collaboration. I'm really proud of what we're doing. So that's something that Blake Lively said to Justin Baldoni. This was the nature of their relationship, which made Lively's later allegations all the more baffling. Lively begins asserting control almost immediately. Almost immediately, Lively began inserting herself into the production process in intrusive ways, well beyond the scope of her contractual entanglements. For example, Lively began to insist on creative control over her character's wardrobe. While lead actors are sometimes granted approval over their character's general look, they generally do not receive full control over wardrobe decisions without input from the director or producers. So this is something that was raised in the New York Times complaint that Justin Baldoni filed. What may seem like an innocuous request can in fact have monumental impact on a film production, because they're saying, well, she may not have the wardrobe experience to know what is going to work well in this movie. Ignoring the director's vision for her character and disposing of the weeks of effort and creativity spent by the wardrobe team on shopping and carefully crafting her wardrobe, Lively sent hundreds of images to the film's costume designer, including into the late hours of the evening, depicting the style of wardrobe she wanted for her character. The costume designer had to reshop Lively's wardrobe, far exceeding the allocated budget and diverting time and resources while also preparing wardrobes for the rest of the cast. At one point, Lively insisted that her character had money and could afford $5,000 shoes, despite being a fledgling small business owner. This forced Baldoni to rethink the entire script that had been in the works for well over a year and was approved by both Sony and Wayfarer, a script that Wayfarer had commissioned multiple drafts of and incorporated countless notes, including input from the book's author, Colleen Hoover. The wardrobe budget ballooned. Lively often refused to participate in wardrobe fittings at the production office, which was a mere 15 minutes from Lively's home. Instead, she insisted that the costume department pack up wardrobe and deliver it to her personal residence. Loading the wardrobe department on trucks and delivering the contents to Lively's home in the middle of congested Manhattan for fittings cost time and money, always in short supply on any major film. Requests of this nature are typically made during contract negotiations. Since Lively made no such requests at the time, this added expense was not included in the budget. Lively, who had a greater obligation to the studios as an executive producer, paid no heed to budget constraints, let alone to the months of planning that had already been completed. I mean, it's interesting that they're criticizing her for that. They're acknowledging that these type of wardrobe delivery for a very class A star celebrity would be something that could be negotiated. They're saying, well, she didn't negotiate it, during the contract phase. Lively does have 4 children, so we all have to keep this in mind. In an effort to maintain harmony at the start of their working relationship and to avoid further delays caused by wardrobe conflicts, Baldoni and the studio reluctantly ceded full control to Lively over her wardrobe. This concession quickly proved regrettable, and now they're just copy and pasting. I think that was in the New York Times complaint. A lot of these facts are facts that have been alleged in his $250 million lawsuit against the New York Times. So in this lawsuit against Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, Justin Baldoni goes on to state, on the first day of principal photography, paparazzi captured and published photos of Lively in character wearing her hand-picked wardrobe. These images were widely reported as unflattering and sparked a backlash from Sony. Baldoni received direct criticism from Sony, who voiced serious concerns about the impact of the photos on the film's public reception. Following these events, Baldoni approached Lively in her trailer to discuss necessary wardrobe adjustments and resetting their relationship to assert his role as director and his need to have approval over her wardrobe. The conversation, while professional, took considerable time and was later grossly misrepresented in Lively's California Civil Rights Department complaint, which falsely characterized the exchange as a lengthy outburst that delayed filming and caused the crew to wait for hours while Baldoni cried in Lively's dressing room. On information and belief, Lively circulated this false account to the New York Times with the intention and result that it be widely published. This conversation did not take hours, and any length of time it took was not because Baldoni cried for hours. In truth, rather than take heed of the concerns of the film's distributor and director, Lively took the time to, among other things, suggest to Baldoni that he was being, quote, gaslit by Sony, Heath, and the other producer, and try to convince him to let her continue to take the helm. Baldoni did briefly become emotional during the conversation, but only in response to what he believed was a genuine compliment from Lively, praising his work as a director and actor. Oh, man. So the two different sides of the narrative. She's saying he was crying in their trailer in this lengthy conversation. He was saying, well, I interpreted her as complimenting me and my work, and so I got emotional. I may have teared up, you know? So in hindsight, this was part and parcel of the ongoing pattern of manipulation and gaslighting by Lively, intended to continue to allow her autonomy over her wardrobe. Lively later distorted this conversation in support of her baseless harassment allegations, alleging that Baldoni made inappropriate comments on her appearance. In reality, Baldoni, the film's director, was relaying the distributor's concerns and the widespread social media criticism regarding the wardrobe's failure to meet audience expectations, a sentiment Baldoni shared. This incident is just one of the many examples of Lively's troubling pattern of manipulation and lies. As another example, early in the pre-production stage, Lively sent Baldoni a long text describing how directors never permitted her to write scenes for the movies that she acted in, nor gave her writing credits, even making her hand scribble her suggestions for lines so that they could not be traced to her. Lively boasted that she had even written for her husband's movies. Then Lively asked if she could take a pass at writing the rooftop scene in It Ends With Us, in which the characters Raul and Lily first meet. This pivotal scene, much beloved by book fans, was critical for setting the tone for the movie. So Baldoni was reluctant to allow an actor rather than a union screenwriter to rewrite this key scene. But Baldoni felt the need to allow Lively to rewrite the scene and agreed to take a look at what she put together. The draft of the rooftop scene that Lively sent Baldoni dramatically differed from what had been written originally. Baldoni was hesitant about many of the changes, but thanked Lively for her passion and diplomatically told her that the scene would likely end up being somewhere between the original version and Lively's version. He was like, oh, geez, I'm just trying to balance this out. She's not, a unionized screenwriter, but I don't want to offend her. Then he says, seemingly stung by Baldoni's exceedingly mild resistance, Lively did not respond and went silent for multiple days. Later, she confirmed in a text message below that Baldoni's response, of course, didn't feel great from me, or another mega celebrity friend and Ryan Reynolds to have my passion praised instead of my specific contribution. Lively was referring to an earlier meeting where Lively summoned Baldoni to her New York penthouse, where Baldoni was greeted by Ryan Reynolds, who launched into enthusiastic praise for Lively's version of the scene. Hours later, as the meeting was ending, a famous and famously close friend of Ryan Reynolds and Lively walked into the room and similarly began praising Lively's script. Baldoni understood the subtext. He needed to comply with Lively's direction for the script. Later, Baldoni felt obliged to text Lively to say that he had liked her pages and hadn't needed Reynolds and her mega celebrity friend to pressure him. Lively responded that the two were her dragons. Lively went on to say, they, Reynolds and the mega celebrity friend, also know I'm not always good at making sure I'm seen and utilized for fear of threatening egos or fear of affecting the ease of the process. They don't give a shit about that. And because of that, everyone listens to them with immense respect and enthusiasm. So I guess I have to stop worrying about people liking me. I don't know, emoji. This message could not have been clearer. Baldoni was not just dealing with Lively, he was also facing Lively's dragons, two of the most influential and wealthy celebrities in the world who were not afraid to make things very difficult for him. Ooh, so she pulled out the husband, Ryan Reynolds, to come stand by her side. And then these are the text messages that Justin Baldoni has produced between Lively and him, where he says this exchange has taken place. Then, these are lengthy ones, man. Sometimes it's really not good practice to have so much in text messages, but these are the text messages that Justin Baldoni has produced between Blake Lively and himself, where he says the subtext was clear, that she's going to be, if he doesn't do what she wants, he's going to have to face Ryan Reynolds and their mega celebrity friend who are going to make life difficult for him. So then Justin Baldoni's complaint goes on to allege difficult proved to be a gross understatement. Though Baldoni initially invited Lively to make changes to the script, Lively began altering the script daily. The frequency of Lively's revisions alarmed the producers, director, and studio, who anticipated that her interference would persist every day of the shoot and disrupt the carefully planned production schedule. Each shooting day was intricately scheduled long in advance, and Lively's constant changes placed significant stress on the production crew, not to mention financial strain on Wayfarer. So then he produces some additional texts. More than a year later, during a red carpet interview at the New York film premiere, Lively stated, "The iconic rooftop scene, my husband actually wrote it. Nobody knows that, but you now." So now she's saying that Ryan Reynolds wrote that scene, interestingly enough. So Justin Baldoni states, this startling revelation directly contradicted Lively's previous insistence that she had written the scene, and certainly casts Reynolds' high praise for the rewritten scene in a different light. The film's credited screenwriter, when asked about the claim that Reynolds had written the scene, graciously responded, "So if I'm being told that Ryan wrote that, then great, how wonderful." She went on to acknowledge there were a few little flourishes that I did not write, and if those flourishes came from Ryan, I think that's wonderful. This was also the first time that plaintiffs learned that Reynolds, who had no formal role whatsoever in the film's production, had made unauthorized changes to the script in secret. Baldoni, equally blindsided by this news, which he discovered in real time during a recorded interview with Access Hollywood, reacted by also praising Reynolds so as not to harm Lively. Reynolds, who apparently wrote the scene, and possibly others during the WGA strike or the Writers Guild strike or the film. Lively's remarks about Reynolds' purported contribution to the script raised eyebrows sky high at Sony, who told Wayfarer that they certainly needed some clarity on public comments made about Ryan Reynolds potentially contributing writing services for the rooftop scene. So then Justin Baldoni produces some additional written communications here. And then he goes on to allege, Still during the pre-production phase, Lively and Reynolds raised entirely false allegations of fat shaming against Baldoni, an accusation that, as evidence will show, was categorically false. Baldoni had been introduced to trainer Don, who became Baldoni's personal trainer, by Lively. Don directed Baldoni's preparation for the film role, including his nutrition and exercise, making special accommodations for Baldoni's back injury. Baldoni even paid to receive Don's meal delivery service. So Baldoni, he even had in his complaint against the New York Times, there was a text message where he was saying he was in the hospital for spine, for some spine issues. So he has back issues. And then he goes on to say that privately, Baldoni reached out to his personal trainer, Don, as his personal trainer, to ask what Lively weighed so that he could train his back muscles in preparation for a lift scene. This was important to avoid injury not only to Baldoni, who suffered from lifelong back injuries, multiple bulging discs, and chronic pain, but also to Lively if the lift could not be completed successfully and safely. Notwithstanding Lively's recent attempts to deny the existence of any such scene, it was only nixed at her insistence after having been planned and rehearsed. So he's saying, look, I wasn't trying to fat shame her. I was just asking about her weight because I didn't want to hurt my back. So that certainly puts a different slant on things. The next morning, Baldoni was summoned to the penthouse by Lively and greeted by Reynolds, who swore at Baldoni and accused him of fat shaming his wife. How dare you effing ask about my wife's weight? What's wrong with you? The confrontation from Reynolds and Lively was so aggressive that Baldoni felt that he had no choice but to offer repeated and completely unwarranted apologies for what was a good faith and reasonable question to ask of his trainer. Reynolds demanded Baldoni remove the scene entirely. Lively refused to perform the lift scene in the end, even after it was rehearsed with a stunt double. In her own complaint, Lively flat out lies about the absence of the scene by claiming the scene wasn't in the film. The only reason the scene wasn't in the film is because Lively and Reynolds ensured that it was taken out of the film. Accommodating Lively, Baldoni rewrote the scene with Lively, despite the fact that for creative reasons, the scene was important to him as a storyteller and director. In fact, Lively had earlier expressed insecurity about her postpartum figure, and Baldoni made every attempt to genuinely reassure her. In this exchange, he stated as her director that anything you feel insecure about, we will talk through and get creative together and make you comfortable. I just don't want you to stress about your body. It's the last thing that you need. When he later tried to do just that, Lively responded with allegations of sexual harassment, followed by a lawsuit. Okay, so here's some additional text messages that that Justin Baldoni has produced. He says, these are things where I was just trying to comfort Blake. I was trying to express to her that she does not need to feel insecure about the fact that she just had a baby, because she did. She had her fourth child prior to this movie. She was there's also some text messages about how she was breastfeeding in the trailer on the movie set, and she had invited Justin Baldoni to come talk to her and rehearse lines while she was breastfeeding. So it's entirely possible she was feeling a little insecure. And he's saying, hey, look, as her director, I was only talking about her body to try to comfort her. So these are some additional text messages that Justin Baldoni has produced. And then he goes on to state in his complaint, Lively then delivered an ultimatum. If Baldoni could not get on board with her work methods, he had 2 weeks to recast her. Oh, so she threatened to leave the production, according to Baldoni. Implicit in this ultimatum was a threat to destroy Baldoni's reputation and career. As Lively well knew, Baldoni has worked hard throughout his career to earn and deserve a reputation based on his passionate advocacy for women's rights, a reputation she would later exploit and weaponize against him. If Lively were to back out of the film, especially based on accusations of fat shaming, Baldoni's reputation, life's work would be left in tatters. He had no choice but to bow to Lively and Reynolds' demands. Concerns about Lively's undue influence over the film began to grow even before filming started. the producer. He cannot let her have opinions on anything. So these are some additional text messages that were produced. This was the first time Lively openly moved to seize control of the film from Baldoni, but it would not be the last. Dun, dun, dun. And on the next page of the complaint, Justin Baldoni goes on to allege filming begins as Lively builds her takeover strategy. Principal photography began for the film in early May of 2023. On set, Lively continued to maintain what later appeared to be a facade of a close, caring relationship with Baldoni, even as she continued to make escalating demands for creative control. By the time production began, Lively and Baldoni had worked closely together for months, and Lively expressed warm gratitude for her collaboration with Baldoni on the eve of filming. So again, more text message proofs that he's producing. Throughout the first filming period, Lively continued to share her open and unguarded thoughts on life and her character. She talked about wardrobe choices to make her character much sexier, and that's a direct quote from a text. She was the one that used the words sexier. And guys, if you're getting value from the stream, please subscribe for daily live streams on celebrity legal news. Next, then Baldoni goes on to state, Lively continued to express her warm appreciation and respect for Baldoni as filming continued, even as she acknowledged that she could be difficult and critical of others, using the kind of language she herself would have alleged to be inappropriate. So she says, thank you, I do appreciate it. I'm just a ball buster, but it means a lot to me. I care a great deal and always want to deliver. You were terrific. I'm proud of everything we did today, but really every day. So he's doing a great job of putting out the receipts of text message proof of what he's contending. At paragraph 58, Justin Baldoni states, Lively's intimate comfort with Baldoni continued as filming progressed. In June of 2023, after the alleged harassment and uncomfortable situations allegedly occurred, she even invited Baldoni to her trailer to rehearse while pumping breast milk. So these are some of the where she says, I'm just pumping in my trail if you want to work on our lines. So Lively was so close and comfortable with Baldoni that she freely breastfed in front of him during meetings. She took photos of him holding and soothing her crying baby in her penthouse. They laughed deliriously during late-night writing sessions. All of these events took place after the alleged sexual harassment. Lively's accusations seemed to come out of the blue. She even knew his tea order. So here's some additional text messages where it shows how close Baldoni and Blake Lively were, where she knew what his tea order was. So some have speculated that Ryan Reynolds has gotten jealous of the close relationship that Baldoni and Blake Lively had, and that really the takeover was at his behest. That's one of the theories that's circulating out there. So next, in the complaint, paragraph 61, Baldoni states Lively herself set the tone for personal discussions on set, including what language was acceptable. For example, on one occasion while filming a restaurant scene, Lively sat on the floor in painfully expensive shoes while discussing with a group of male cast and crew how sexy her shoes were. Lively had no issue using the word sexy herself, but apparently took note both times Baldoni said the word in her presence. Next page. I will say, though, that I kind of disagree with their slant on that paragraph, because I think that as the producer, as her boss, Wayfarer Studios, Justin Baldoni's company, is her employer. I think that there's a difference between what Blake Lively as the actor says about herself versus what it is appropriate language when you're dealing, with your employee. So I think there's arguments on both sides, okay? So the next part of Justin's complaint states, though she was loose and relaxed in her speech on set, she was increasingly stringent in the demands that she imposed on the production. She rewrote her own dialogue constantly and took it upon herself to make unilateral changes to other characters' lines, effectively rewriting the script day by day. This pattern of domineering interference caused unending interruptions to the production process, leading to entirely unnecessary stress, chaos, and delays. It is well documented on film footage how frequently she requested changes and how at every turn Baldoni took her thoughts and, out of fear of repercussions from Lively and her allies, he consistently tried to accommodate them. So the SGA-AFTRA strike soon followed, beginning on July 14, 2023. To make the most of time during the strike, Baldoni began editing the footage that had been captured to date, starting the director's process of turning footage into film. Lively expressed excitement over returning to shoot in the fall in New York, making no mention of any discomfort or harassment that would be brought up only later after months of being apart on the day the strikes ended. So, next paragraph. So then, Baldoni alleges, both before and during the strikes, Lively's eager involvement in the production took on a more insistent and manipulative tone as she asked for access to the dailies, and early cuts of scenes, both inappropriate and unorthodox requests. So Justin's saying she wanted to have control over editing. She wanted to have control over rewriting the script. So then he produces these messages as proofs of what he's saying. And then he goes on to allege Wayfarer, Baldoni, and another producer on the film strategized about how to respond to Lively, which became common practice so as not to trigger backlash from Lively. The text exchange below demonstrates adamant objections to giving Lively the dailies. Not only was it an inappropriate overreach, but there was a very real concern that a simple ask such as rewriting a couple of scenes would turn into a complete takeover, rewriting the script. They rightly feared that giving her the dailies could turn into her demanding to edit the whole movie, which is exactly what ultimately happened. So here's some additional text messages that Justin Baldoni asserts prove his point. And then he alleges in his complaint, then he goes on to these are some additional text messages. So he's really doing great at producing the receipts of what he's alleging has transpired between him and Blake Lively and the behind-the-scenes takeover by Blake Lively of this film. So then he states, after consulting internally as how to respond, Baldoni politely pushed back, explaining that it was much too early in the editing process to share much footage. So then these are his messages. Some of it is redacted for privacy. And then he goes on to state, at that point, Lively reluctantly paid nominal lip service to the notion that Baldoni, the film's director, was entitled to the time and space needed for his directorial cut, but continued to push. So here are some additional text messages between the parties where Baldoni claims that Blake Lively continued to push him to get more and more access to the footage. She wanted more editing control. She wanted to essentially rewrite the script. Baldoni shared limited scenes with Lively, feeling uncomfortable all the while, yet he already knew that he had to bow to Lively's demands in order to get out the film and its powerful message. Finally, he put his foot down, sending Lively one final scene and then telling her that he would not be sending any more cuts until he was finished his editorial process. So he's like, I got to take a stand. I'm the director. So then he claims that the Writers Guild strike ended on September 27, 2023, and the SAG-AFTRA strike ended on November 9, 2023. Months later, Baldoni had made Lively's representative aware that they would continue pre-production in order to hit the ground running when the strikes ended. But Lively and her lawyers had been busy devising other plans during the strike. And I ask, guys, if you're getting value from the stream, ask that you hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified of all of our daily live streams on Celebrity Legal News. The same day that the SAG-AFTRA strike ended, Baldoni, the studios, and producers were eager to resume production. Instead, they were met with an email from Lively's lawyer who sent Wayfarer an unsettling and unexpected 17-point list of non-negotiable conditions that must be met before Lively would return to work. The stunning list was drafted for the apparent purpose of insinuating or outright claiming that Baldoni, Heath, and others had engaged in sexually inappropriate conduct during filming. Nothing could be further from the truth. So they're claiming, well, we were forced to sign this. You know, she had such leverage and power and control as the lead. You know, Ryan Reynolds and is her husband. They were she was exerting all this power, we had to go ahead and sign these 17 list of this list of 17 demands that strongly insinuated that we had inappropriate sexual conduct toward her, but we didn't. So then, and that list has been used against Justin Baldoni in the public. In her complaint, in Lively's California Civil Rights Department complaint, she did use that list of 17 items that she says, hey, look, Justin Baldoni signed this and he agreed not to do X, Y, and Z on the set. And she did use that to insinuate that he had been inappropriate towards her on the set of It Ends With Us. So then Justin Baldoni's complaint against Blake Lively goes on to state, both Wayfair and Sony attempted to revise the document to make it factually accurate, being that their representation of set culture was inaccurate, and sent comments through Wayfair's attorney, who incorporated Sony's notes, but Lively's counsel's response made it clear that the list was not open for negotiation. So now they're really producing the receipts. They're producing all of these behind-the-scenes communications that had occurred. And then it was clear that Wayfair would have to sign the document as is, despite the falsity of its insinuations. The alternative was to lose millions of dollars, cost hundreds of people their jobs after they had been out of work for months, and destroy their relationship with Sony. Nonetheless, the demands themselves were agreeable. Indeed, some were already in place. To illustrate the distorted and downright fictional basis for the 17-point list of demands, each of them is addressed in turn below. Point 1, intimacy coordinator. Lively demanded that an intimacy coordinator be present at all times when Lively was on set. In fact, an intimacy coordinator had already been engaged during the first half of the production, so Wayfarer took no issue with this request itself, despite both Lively and her attorney knowingly insinuating that there was not one. So on or about March 20th, 2023, nearly 2 months before filming began, Baldoni met with the intimacy coordinator in early April of 2023. More than 6 weeks before production commenced, she was engaged. So he says, hey, look, Blake Lively was aware that we already had engaged an intimacy coordinator. In fact, Blake Lively had said she didn't want to meet with her until the first day of shooting. So Lively was aware, as Baldoni had informed her in writing on or about April 6, 2023. So Lively's attorney was also aware, as documented in May 8, 2023 emails between her and Wayfarer's attorney, within which Wayfarer provides her the intimacy coordinator approved nudity rider, followed by written confirmation of said approval. So there's more receipts of what he's alleging. So Blake knew that this intimacy coordinator had been retained. And then Justin Baldoni's complaint states, although the presence of an intimacy coordinator is not a Screen Actors Guild rule, but rather a recommendation, Baldoni was eager to engage one from the start to ensure talent, himself included, felt safe during intimate scenes. It was also important to him that the intimacy coordinator be a woman to help craft sex scenes that would speak to the mostly female audience of the book, i.e., be written from the female gaze, a fact that Lively later mocked in both her complaint and her CRD complaint. So then, Justin goes on to state that given both Lively and Reynolds' firsthand knowledge of these facts, Lively's insistence in her November 9th, 2023 return to production demands on the constant presence of an intimacy coordinator was baffling. However, because Wayfarer had already engaged an intimacy coordinator and had no issue with the request, and given that the request came with the threat that Lively would not come back to work after months of filming and planning, Wayfarer acquiesced. This acquiescence, given with the written caveat that Wayfarer disagreed with the characterizations, was later used by Lively to falsely suggest an acknowledgement that there had not been an intimacy coordinator at all. Point 2 of Blake's demands, limiting review of intimate scene footage to those with essential business reasons. Given that this was already standard practice in the film industry and in practice on the film set, Wayfarer readily agreed to this demand, though without any reason to believe that the demand was made in response to any inappropriate conduct. Despite having filmed for over a month and despite having been provided a nudity rider and the opportunity to negotiate, finalize, and sign, Lively had never asked for a closed set. However, production has always adhered to this and had no problem agreeing to this demand. For clarity,
No intimacy scenes were even shot prior to the November 9, 2023 return to production demands. Therefore, under no circumstance did Lively shoot intimate scenes without a nudity rider, as suggested in her complaint. And production did not violate any SAG-AFTRA rules. The one simulated nude scene filmed prior to the strike break and the November 9, 2023 return to production demands was a scene that Lively wrote, knew of in advance, and directed the action for, and she never requested a nudity rider intimacy coordinator for that scene. So that's interesting. So they're acknowledging there was one scene, but they're saying, well, she wrote it and she didn't have any issues with it. This demand as written suggests nude or intimate scenes were filmed with non-essential personnel present. Later in her complaint, Lively alleges that during a scene, the birthing scene, she was mostly nude with her legs spread wide in stirrups and only a small piece of fabric covering her genitalia, and that there were non-essential persons present. This allegation is knowingly false. To begin with, to describe Lively as mostly nude and naked from below the chest down is dishonest. Lively was wearing black briefs and a pregnancy suit that covered her midsection, and her top was covered by a hospital gown. Her legal complaint deliberately suggests that she was wearing a small piece of nude fabric glued around her genitalia by stating this is generally what female actors use to provide some minimal privacy without disturbing the shot, leaving the reader to believe Lively was only wearing this small fabric. Lively was aware of this birthing scene as she was heavily involved in writing rather than rewriting the script and gave creative input for this specific scene, even against the director's creative vision. Moreover, film footage clearly demonstrates that the set was not chaotic, as she alleges, and only essential individuals, film crew talent, were present for the scene and doing their jobs. Importantly, Lively knowingly and falsely alleges that the film's financier was present during these scenes and insinuates he was watching her nude, which he had no desire to do. He was not even on set during the filming of that scene. He arrived later, merely stopping by for a brief moment amid his busy business schedule, and was present during the filming of a scene in which Lively's character spoke with a female OBGYN doctor, a scene in which she was fully clothed. So they're alleging that the way that she's depicting this is completely different than what has happened. Now, friends, I want to let you know this complaint, we're at page 50, I believe. We're at page 52 of this complaint. So we're about 1/3 of the way through. I'm going to be back on later on tonight live going through the rest of this complaint. I wanted to let you know that if you are getting value from the stream, I ask that you hit the subscribe button and support the channel, because that does help us on YouTube. It helps us get our reach out. And I really appreciate all of your wonderful comments. I've responded my best of my ability to every single one. You guys as an audience are fantastic. You have so much great insight into all this drama going on with Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni. We've also covered the Vanderpump Rules litigation. And interestingly enough, Brian Friedman, who represents Justin Baldoni, also represents Rachel Leviss, who's suing Tom Sandoval and Ariana Madix. So there's a lot of tie-ins here, friends. Brian Friedman is very well sought after as a Los Angeles entertainment attorney. And guys, we also have been covering the Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie. They're still arguing about Miraval, the chateau at which they got married, where their family home was. The court has required Brad Pitt to produce documents that Angelina Jolie says will prove that he was domestically violent to herself and their children. So again, we have a tie-in between cases. It Ends With Us was about domestic violence. We have a domestic violence allegation going on in the Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie case. We've also been covering the Sean Diddy Combs federal prosecution, all the civil lawsuits against Sean Combs, and we've been covering the Jay-Z tie-in because Jay-Z was also named by Tony Busby in a refiled complaint, and now Jay-Z has been pulled into he has been pulled into the allegations that have riddled Sean Combs. And this anonymous alleged victim is claiming that Jay-Z and Sean Diddy Combs both assaulted her after the 2000 MTV Music Video Awards after an after party. So we've been covering all of that legal drama, friends. So Subscribe to the channel for daily live streams. We come to you live every day. We have the actual legal complaints that have been filed, and we go through them in meticulous detail, friends. As an attorney myself, I have some very specific experience in handling cases that involve similar torts, defamation, false light, invasion of privacy. I've handled cases in Los Angeles County on the defense side. So guys, let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Let me know what legal stories that you're interested in hearing on this channel. I want to grow this channel with you, my friends, my audience, and make this channel into what you're interested in seeing. So guys, let me know in the comments, and I will look forward to seeing you later on tonight, where we're going to finish out this complaint that Justin Baldoni has filed, asking the court for $400 million against Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. So friends, I look forward to seeing you later on. Talk to you then.